Welcome to Patricia Fripp's How to Become a Great Speaker Easily, Conveniently, and Quickly. You are in for a treat. We have an action-packed, content-rich experience for you. In case we have not met before virtually, I'm Paul Griffin. In my role as Director of Client Experience for Fripp VT, I moderate all of Patricia's web training sessions. As you know, Patricia is a true expert in all aspects of presentations and sales presentations. We will be excuse me. We'll be conducting polls, and you can ask questions throughout the call. Get them in early and make them short and specific. To ask a question, you'll enter it into the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. This area is also where polling questions will appear. When answering a polling question, select your answer and then click Vote. Our first poll is, do you consider yourself a leader, a sales professional, or a speaker consultant coach? While you answer that question, I'll go ahead and answer one that you actually already may have. Why is Patricia not the one to welcome us? Well, Patricia is a real trooper and believes the show must go on. This is the largest attendance that we've had at any of our webinars in the past, but as fate would have it, on Tuesday, Patricia had a small accident. She is feeling fine. However, as you will soon notice, her face is slightly raised and she does have stitches in her lips. But even her vanity did not stop her from coming out in the virtual public. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Patricia.
How do you become a great speaker easily, conveniently, and quickly? Very simply, this needs to be the focus of your attention. 2, find time on a regular basis to put your energies towards that pursuit. 3, learn from somebody who knows more about the subject than you do. Certainly, I do not know what you know, and you are an expert in what you know. For 40 years, I know that's aging me, for 40 years, I have been focusing on what is the best way to get your message across more powerfully and more persuasively. Then 5, if you have a resource that can help you shorten the learning curve, that is very helpful. And naturally, we have one to recommend to you. And we certainly, instead of coming live with my puffy lips, we could have played a replay of an earlier show with the same subject. However, although our content is similar, what we do is focus on where our primary audience comes from, and your questions are specific to you. We realize many of our friends will be watching the replay link. However, the questions of those of you who are live, we want to get to as many or all as possible. So, Paul, how is the makeup of this specific audience?
We have 44% leaders, 6% sales professionals, and 49% speaker consultants or coaches.
Great. Well, let us look at the 5 specific areas to focus on to improve your presentations, and then we will look for advice for leaders and speakers, and certainly for some sales professionals, even though it's a smaller makeup of this audience. There are 5 specific areas I recommend that you look at. And what we will be doing is bringing up a slightly more glamorous virtual Fripp to show you some areas of these 5 elements. So simply they are, how do you open with impact? And of course, close with a high. 2, how do you connect to your audience? Because this is all about the audience, not about you. 3, how do you simply structure your presentation so it's easy for you to remember and easy for the audience? 4, how do you have stories that make your audience help understand your message because they see it while they hear your words? And 5, how do we add razor sharp specificity to make sure that you are clear, concise, and your message sounds as valuable as it possibly can be? So let us start with, how do you open with impact? And there are multiple ways you can open. The way I would suggest you do not open is to start by introducing yourself. Hi, I'm Patricia Fripp, and I'm here to talk about. One, even if you have to introduce yourself, I recommend you wander around and you schmooze with the audience and you shake hands and you introduce yourself there. Two, chances are your name is on the program, your name's on the PowerPoint, they know who they came to see. And even if they do not know and you did not shake all their hands and introduce yourself, say something of interest first. And then you might say, in case we haven't had the pleasure of meeting, I am. So talk about them before you introduce yourself. You can start with an interesting statistic. And if you look at your content, the chances are you have some interesting statistics within the body of your speech. Why don't you try for fun bringing some of those statistics up earlier? And if it is a statistic about your audience's world, not so much yours, if you're an outside guest speaker, you get extra points and you certainly build your credibility. One of my favorite examples of this is when I spoke to 350 Seventh-day Adventist pastors. The program was how to design and deliver a more charismatic sermon. It is always helpful if we consider what is the audience thinking coming in to this situation, just as we did. If you've been to any of my virtual meetings before, you know I am always the one who welcomes you. So we need to explain away. We need to answer your unasked question. And I would expect with the Seventh-day Adventist pastors, a generous, of course, audience, but they would be thinking, look, she's the only person on the program who isn't a minister. How can anyone who isn't a minister tell me how to write a better sermon? I write one every week. And, I bet she isn't even a Seventh-day Adventist, which I'm not. They would be generous enough to know that somebody on the committee thought this woman earned a slot. However, to grab their attention immediately, what I did was walk out and say, 465 times in the Bible, it said it came to pass. It did not say it came to stay. And unless your sermon is well constructed, artfully crafted, and charismatically delivered, it will not come to stay in the hearts, minds, and lives of your congregation. And if you have never heard 350 people in an audience say amen and hallelujah after your opening sentence, you have not lived. So may I also suggest that I did not think of that opening as I was walking on stage. I had this prepared in advance. And often when I talk to my audience about how are you going to open, or if I'm with a small coaching team getting ready for a convention or a client meeting, how you can open. And often I hear, well, you know, I have the body of my speech ready and I'm going to wait till I get there and see what's going on that I could adapt and deliver as part of my opening. And this is the message. And if you want to tweet at @pfripp, #frippvt.com. This is the soundbite. Do not trust inspiration. Certainly, there are times that something happens that we can immediately incorporate. So, for example, I was speaking for Blue Cross Blue Shield, and just in the ladies' room putting on my lipstick, a woman was at cross next to me doing the same. She had a name tag. Blue Cross Blue Shield. I said, oh, how long have you worked for? She said, 10 years. What's the biggest difference? She said, more competition. How much competition? She said, 10 years ago, we had 3 major competitors. Now we have 30. So as I walked out to my introduction, I walked on stage and said, Susan just told me 10 years ago, you had 3 major competitors. Now you have 30. In the next 58 minutes, let's look at specific ways that you can market and sell against stronger competition. So that was a time that the inspiration was there. And you might think, well, Fripp, if we don't trust inspiration, what do we trust? Very simply, technique. Techniques will never let you down. Many people are naturally talented speakers. In fact, Paul is going to bring up a poll to see if you consider yourself a beginner, intermediate, or advanced speaker. Some people are, it's more natural to get up in the first place. However, even if it is natural for you to speak, to stand up in front of strangers, you still need to learn the basic techniques on how to structure and connect so that you can always be as effective as you are capable of becoming. So we know you're not going to trust inspiration. We know that you can start with an interesting statistic. You can certainly start with a story. You can start with a statement. I have on occasion started this way, which is my opinion, a statement. It never ceases to amaze me that intelligent, well-educated, ambitious individuals frequently overlook developing the number one skill that is absolutely guaranteed to position them ahead of the crowd, namely developing the ability to stand up and speak eloquently with confidence, or at very least stagger to their feet and say anything at all. Perhaps that is because, as Oscar winner Jack Lemmon said, to speak in public takes the nerve of a bullfighter, the energy of a nightclub host, and the concentration of a Buddhist monk. And I believe Jack Lemmon said that very well. So, Paul, what is the makeup of this specific audience, at least with our live friends?
Well, we have, excuse me, we have 20% beginners, 60% intermediate, and 20% advanced. I'm sorry, Ms. Fripp, you're still muted. At the top of your screen, just click the unmute button. I apologize.
All right, we now live. You gave me the power back, Paul.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, good. It is great if you consider yourself a novice, because you can learn the basics early. Many of our friends who are advanced, a lot of what you have to learn is to unlearn some of the bad habits, which brings up a very important issue. And that is, you will not improve what you're not aware of. I often hear clients say, I talk too fast. And I say, well, how do you know that? Well, my boss tells me I talk too fast. I say, do you hear that from one person, or do you hear it from multiple people? Have you ever recorded yourself? And if you haven't heard what other people are saying for yourself, you won't be as convinced to improve it. I was listening to a gentleman talking. He was with a company I do ongoing work with, and every sentence had an at the beginning or the end, which means he is not comfortable with silence to think, what is it I'm going to say? And comfortable with the silence to then think what comes next. And I asked him, if you recorded yourself? No. Well, again, when you listen to our conversation, you will find it's all ums, which is very distracting. And for a sales professional, a speaker, consultant, coach, and certainly a leader, you will sound as if you're not confident if you have too many ums. So on the subject of openings, Paul, why don't we go over and show our friends the first the first segment of the chapter on openings in Fripp Virtual Training, and so they can see what I look like when I don't fall on my face.
Certainly.
Fripp VT is, of course, the ongoing resource, which is where you can have me as your personal speech coach 24/7. You will never disturb me.
And that was the first chapter. Which course
The
was
first chapter of openings, yes, Paul. And Fripp VT is not only the way you can easily, conveniently, and quickly learn to be a great speaker, it certainly is a very cost-effective way. Well, you have choices, options, and openings to techniques. In this course, you will learn you have dozens of opening techniques to choose from, all examples of how you can use them. If you're ready, click the Start Training button. Welcome to You Have Choices, Options of Openings to Techniques. As you soon will come to discover, our subtitle is How to Open Your Presentation with Impact. At the beginning of a speech, presentation, seminar, client meeting, report to senior management, sales presentation, or any manner of presentation you deliver, you need to arouse interest in the subject. After all, we stand in the rain to see a movie. Would you stand in the rain to listen to your presentation? You have 30 seconds to command the attention of your audience. Don't waste it. Certain speech openings captivate, mystify, and create an emotional bond that keeps an audience in the palm of the speaker's hand. What would you give to learn those essential opening words and techniques? Great ways to bond instantly with an audience so you never see them dozing off or wandering out of the room. Okay, Paul, that's fine if you can bring them back to me. Yeah, so we want to make sure your audience never dozes off. Another way that you can open, and feel free to write your specific questions. And also, if you would like to submit your opening line of an upcoming presentation, we can certainly do some instant coaching. So Paul will let me know when you have a question or line to submit. You might also want to use a question, and I like rhetorical questions. And this could sound something like this. If I were to ask you, is 2016 the year you double your sales? Or I could say, is 2016 the year you increase your effectiveness as a leader or a sales professional? So you see, and then give them choices. So it might sound, if I were to ask you, is 2016 the year you double your sales results? Perhaps you'd say yes, perhaps no. Most likely you would say, Patricia, I would love it to be. Can you tell me how? Well, congratulations. You are at the right place at the right time, because in the next 90 minutes, you will learn 8 specific ways on how you can double sales with your own client base and data management system. So can you see from the opening, and I am making it you focused, we are immediately setting up the structure or the framework of your presentation. So however you open your talk, then you need to immediately get into the structure, the content. Now, for those of you who are leaders, I was working with one of my favorite executive coaching clients, and it was presented to me, Patricia, our president is not a bad speaker. He's an engineer, a little shy, but this company does not have any corporate rock stars. can you write him a speech, turn into a rock star, and you've got 4 hours. It's amazing how fast people expect transformation. However, he was a great student. And the first question I asked, which is the first question I would ask any of you as you're putting together your presentation, I said, if you had one sentence rather than 45 minutes, what would you say? And he said, this is a brand new company. So I said, great. Your opening is welcome to a brand new company. And then, well, who decided it was new company? It wasn't salespeople. I know 40% of them were acquired. They didn't even choose to work for you. You bought them. And then he said, well, it was the board of directors. Where were you? We were in Paris in the boardroom. Who said what to whom? Arnold, who had been on the board for 10 years, said, what can we do once and forever to grab the market share? And I told them we could do this, that, or take the boldest move ever, which is buy our competition. And as he was talking about strategy, and this is very important for leaders, as we were talking about strategy, I said, when was the first time you understood the importance of strategy? And he told me about when he was 14 years old and he was a ball boy for the French Open. And as people came in to see the French Open, they didn't realize they were going to see a match with the ball boys first. And he said, I was playing against my best friend and we were equally matched. But our ball boy was a girl and it was his sister. And the way she was throwing the balls, it was really to sabotage my game. So Patricia, that was when I learned the importance of strategy against an equally competent opponent. And the question that all of my corporate clients ask, and you might be curious, is, do they really want to hear these simple stories about when I was young? And the answer is yes, because as a leader, they will respect your position. However, when they see the person behind the position, that is when they will really be committed to you. So personal stories show the person behind the position, and they have the confidence of knowing, wow, our president has been studying strategy since he was 14. The strategy he is presenting is probably sound. Now, Paul, do we have any questions or opening lines?
We do have an opening line.
Oh, good.
Bob. He says, you as a financial advisor are about to enter the perfect storm.
Great. I like it. I like it. And no, that's very good. What he could perhaps do, just to engage the audience, is to say, consider this, then pause for a couple of seconds. You as a financial advisor are entering a perfect storm. Perfect. Wonderful. Any more, Paul?
Yes, we have Linda. Her opening phrase is, ladies and gentlemen, I do not want you to be afraid, but I am holding the most dangerous substance known to man, more deadly than all the wars, natural disasters, or historical plagues. This diabolical substance is 1 pound of body fat.
Wow, that's very good. We have some great. All right, good. Now, and this is fine. And what you're doing, if you're addressing an audience, ladies and gentlemen, is a good way. All I would recommend, and this is fabulous, is to talk, when you say ladies and gentlemen, you're addressing the entire audience, and that is quite appropriate. What you can also do is to make emotional connection, is to talk to one person rather than the audience. So give me the opening line again, Paul.
Ladies and gentlemen, I do not want you to be afraid, but I am holding the most dangerous substance known to man.
Okay, stop there. I would also suggest find a way to take the but out of your mouth. And then you could say, It may not be obvious. It might not be obvious to you. However, within my hand, or I am holding, and just play with it. Now, how do you know if one way is better than another when they both sound great? You simply try them both ways and see if one gets you a better response. And also, when we deliver a presentation that is a frequent similar presentation, then what I always recommend is find different ways to open, because it helps you fall in love with your own subject again. It's just as we have delivered this same title presentation virtually before. However, they're always different because we want it to be fresh for us. Any more, Paul?
Yes, from Jenny. She works for a nonprofit, and whenever they make a presentation, they start with a slide about the organization, mission, history, programs, etc. Based on your suggestion not to start by introducing yourself, this now sounds like a bad idea. Are they wrong in thinking this info is essential to share up front?
I would personally engage the audience before you showed them a slide, because if there were one way that you are going to sabotage what could be a great presentation, it is to start with a slide deck. Now, understand, we're going to use slides, we're going to use PowerPoint. I love it. However, if you turned up for the presentation without a slide deck, would they get the message? If they sent your slide deck and you didn't turn up, would they get the message? No, you are more important. So the process, as we look at speech structure, a PowerPoint is tidy and the creative process is messy. So what I would do is put your PowerPoint to the side and then perhaps collaborate with the other team members and go into a boardroom and just write on a flip chart or a whiteboard or even a yellow pad what's going in. And in your case, what I would highly recommend is you start with a story about a person that your organization helps, because statistics can shock. However, when you see a day in the life of a real life person that is helped, you are more likely to open your wallet. And it could start this way. I wish you could have met Dan in 2012. You would have seen now the most amazing and the better Dan's life sounds than if you had met him in January of 2014. You would have seen a very different life and a very different experience. And then what you're going to do is talk about life before, what the challenge was, and then you're going to talk about what your organization did. So if you met Dan now, and perhaps your Dan, your person might be in the audience, then you can, this is a real life story. Now, with a lot of my friends who raise money, you go, so one, you can certainly talk about, and you might want to tell the story from different types of people. For example, I was helping somebody talk about modern day slavery, and which is a larger issue than most people realize. And I suggested you have to tell the story of modern day slavery through the eyes of a man, a woman, and then perhaps a couple. And then you introduced about your organization, and you talk about what's the history and why were you started, and then you can give some interesting statistics. And then towards the end, you would say, at this point, you're probably thinking, how can I help? Well, there are 4 ways. 1, with your time, with your money, with your influence, and a combination of all four. Because there are many people who they want to support your organization, but they don't have a lot of money, but they could have time. There are a lot of people who are busy, they don't have time, but they certainly do have money. It's easier for them to write a check. And influence, let's overlook the power of influence. And then you might say, when you talk about this luncheon, and please do, remember to tell the story of Dan. And you're reminding them of stories, and you might remember what your mission is. Some of our listeners are from the Wounded Warrior Project, and you say is, the greatest tragedy is to be forgotten. So whatever your tagline, it could be your last words linger. So hope that helps. And for others, you might see how these principles would work for you. Any questions or opening lines, Paul?
We have a question from Walter. What kind of do you project?
I'm sorry, Paul, I didn't hear that very well. So let me look and see. This is from
Zena.
Oh, we have quite a few. And you might wonder, where is Zena? Let's see. Yes. We have all heard a picture is worth 1,000 words. What kind of picture do you project? I'm not exactly sure what Zimmer means. However, we can speak visually. So, for example, I was coaching somebody, she got up and said, my dad walked into a diner, looked at the waitress and said, that's my wife, in 1946. And I said, well, I'm sure this is a great story. And obviously they got married because you're here to tell the story. What you need to do is present information in a way that people can see it. And there's a formula. And this is when, where, who, what happens. If you started with in 1946, even if you were not born then, you know this is the end of World War II. You know from movies, from photographs, from stories from your parents or grandparents, what your town or America looks like. If you come from England, I very vividly know about the stories from England. So wherever you grew up, because we do have an international community, and you know a diner looked different in 1946 than it might be now. And in my story, I see her dad in a uniform, and I have a certain emotional connection to anyone who serves our country or our countries in the armed forces. So for me, I know in 1946, he has experienced situations he will never tell his family about. He'll never talk about his civilian friends. He might not even talk. They would just acknowledge the people he served with. I know this because my Uncle Bill, who spent all of World War II in a prisoner of war camp, did not start talking about this until 2001. So you see, so we're filling in the blanks. Now, you might not see him in a uniform. It doesn't matter. Whatever you are seeing helps you remember the story. And he walks in alone. He looks at the waitress. And I bet in my story, in an American diner, he's going to go look at the counter. The waitress is probably going to say, would you like some pie and coffee, honey? And he looks at her and thinks, this is my wife. So you see, part of this, one is how you present the information. When, where, who, what happened. The other way you are going to do that is to use specific language. And one of the shortest chapters in Fripp VT or the course is. And one of the most valuable is specific language. And Paul, in a minute, we're going to show them chapter 1 of stories. If you can get that ready, well, we're talking about specific language. So, for example, stuff is my pet peeve. It's rubbish, it's debris, it has no value. And even the word thing, I'm always asking my clients specifically, what do you mean by thing? Is it a technique? Is it a formula? Is it a strategy? Is it a discipline? Is it a habit? All those words are more important than thing. And when you say, oh, I got tons of leads. No, you didn't. What do you mean by tons? I went to the networking event and I walked out with 26 business cards. 6 of them would be great prospects. I've already followed up with 3 and we have demos. So this is more specific. So Paul, are you ready to demo the first chapter of stories?
Yes.
The importance of a good story. Nobody can resist a good story well told. In this course, you will learn the techniques that will make your stories and examples memorable and repeatable. If you're ready, click the Start Training button.
In just 1 second, sorry about that.
The magic of technology.
Let's look at some not so basic story basics. Stories and examples are best when they come from your experience. Your audience has a chance to relive them from their perspective. Here are 5 important points to make your stories credible. Point 1, make your story part of your own experience. If you tell a story that belongs to the world, in other words, it is well known from a best-selling book, or they've been teaching it for years in the Dale Carnegie course, you lose your credibility. If your story is in the public domain, your audience is familiar with it and knows it does not come from your experience. Your entire presentation then is flavored that it's not original, fresh, or leading edge. I'll never forget getting off a plane and meeting a client who said, Patricia, I just heard Barbara Bush speak. She told you Bobby Lewis' story. At the time, I imagined Barbara Bush sitting in bed in Houston with the book Chicken Soup for the Soul, putting together a speech. That is where my story was published, and I assume the way it worked into her speech. After speaking at the Reagan Speechwriting Conference, I realized the speechwriter was preparing her speech for her. As good as my Bobby Lewis story is, Barbara Bush and her speechwriter shortchanged her audience. She has lived a fascinating life. Don't you think the audience wanted to hear her own stories, not mine? Based on their overwhelming success, I do not recommend you tell stories from Chicken Soup of the Soul series unless you wrote the story. Does that mean you can't repeat a story you heard? Well, give credit to where the story came from. Never pretend it happened to you. You can mention and even retell a good story you heard from a speaker, your boss, or an industry expert, as long as you don't claim it was from your life experience, and then you tie into your experience that builds on that point that you were making. You owe it to your audience to use stories from your life. Time for a couple of questions. Are you ready? When you tell stories that are in the public domain,
As you can see with the Fripp virtual training, and Paul, you can bring me back to me.
All right.
As you can see with Fripp virtual training, what we do, we ask you questions throughout, not to trick you, but just to make sure you're really learning the information. Because how you learn any skill, and why we designed the Fripp virtual training, is because there is a dirty little secret in the training industry. When you have a great speaker with great content and an audience that is genuinely interested in the subject, which is when all the stars align, 2 weeks after, chances are they will forget 70% of what they heard. Now, hopefully the 30% makes a major difference. The only way you really learn and retain information is with repetition and reinforcement. And you will find with Fripp virtual training that we have everything, all the courses are in digestible, short chapters where we interact with you. We ask questions at the end so you really retain it. There's a way for you to save your favorite if you want to find them easily. And we cover all areas of presentations, whether it's structuring, opening, connecting to your audience, finding content, leadership presentations, sales presentations, webinar delivery, because more and more we present virtually. And if most of your presentations is webinars, then what I recommend you do, you turn the webcam on when you are welcoming your audience or your prospects or your clients. Then you might turn it off if you're going through demonstrations or delivering your webinar, and then you bring the webcam on to answer questions, and then you certainly bring the webcam on when you say goodbye to people. So what have we been focusing on? Certainly different ways to open. You need to connect your audience. And one that we have discussed is you talk to one person rather than an audience. We need to have a good balance with you focused language. So you're not going to say, I'm going to talk about. It's what you will hear. And there is a great way in your openings is you're introducing statistics. And, you know, we love these interesting statistics. And this is to add emotion. And here are some options, and feel free to tweet at PFripp, hashtag FrippVT. You can add emotion by starting. Would it interest you to know? Would it surprise you to know? Would it disgust you to know? Would it horrify you to know? Now, you see, you have you-focused language immediately getting into your interesting statistic. And when people hear you, they are going to be engaged. Now, I look down at some of the questions in the opening polls. I'm just going to have a look. An audience is women. And I like this. Where did you learn where did you learn about managing money? Then your parents, in school, the financial guru, yeah, Susie, good. And then pause. 80% of women will be totally responsible for their finances during a divorce, being single or widowhood. All I would do, that is a very good opening, and I would, before the 80%, you might say, would it surprise you to know that 80% of women will become good? So that's very good. Dan, opening the line, one of my talks on fathers for people in child protection system. Do you honestly think the fathers you work with actually think you like them? I would change think to believe and try it. Do you honestly believe the fathers you work with? And then I say, believe, would you think the fathers you work with are confident you like them? And again, my approach, and this is why it's good to have a script of your opening lines. My approach is to put your words under a magnifying glass, and you look at what change or better word or descriptive word could make it better. Let me look down here. What were those words? Where, when, okay. Where is it? So, for example, if you look at it, that's how we introduce the story formula. It would also be some of the important lines in your speech. So, for example, this is one that we use in Fripp BT. We could turn on CNN or read in the newspaper a line like this. President Obama delivered a speech on healthcare at Yale University yesterday. Now, if you take the principle from comedy, there is a setup phrase and a punch phrase. So the punch phrase or punch word triggers the laugh. Take my wife, please. That's what triggers the laugh. In business communication, what we have is the setup phrase and the impact phrase. The impact phrase comes at the end of the sentence. It would be memorable. So if we take our sentence and say, yesterday, the audience thinks, oh, recent history. At Yale University, I haven't been there, but I imagine great grounds, lovely buildings. President Obama, I know who that is, delivered a speech on healthcare. I maintain what he spoke about, what the speech was on, is more important than was it Yale or Harvard yesterday, the day before. So when, where, who, what happened, and that is the impact phrase. Let's have a look. Great leaders stand up. I think this is something like great leaders stand up for what they believe. If you are or aspire to be a great leader, please stand. I like it very much, Dale. Then Dan, opening the line for one of my talks on fathers. Okay, good. We got that. Let's see.
Diane.
As a non-profit. Okay. As a nonprofit hosting event with clients, partners, investors, what would a good opening be in such a diverse audience? Oh, well, certainly it could be. Well, I don't know what the invitation said. What you could say is welcome to the ABC celebration. Whether you are a client, partner, or investor, you are welcome, and we promise you a fabulous evening. So when you have a diverse audience, as you're going through the talking points in your presentation, then we do need to acknowledge the different parts of that audience. So, for example, one of my regular clients is the American Payroll Association. So we have payroll managers, we have human resource professionals, and we might even have some IT specialists there. And then within the presentation, you're always going to acknowledge. So for a payroll manager, this is important in this way. Now, if you are in HR, this is how you're going to use this technique. And for our friends who are IT experts, thank you for your work in making this available to us. So you just acknowledge, not with every talking point, but with a lot of them. Let's see. What the thoughts? Starting out with an icebreaker after everyone to get up. Now, Lynn, personally myself, I would not immediately start and ask people to stand up unless you have a very good relationship with the audience. Because what happens, and I have seen great speakers who ask the audience to participate before they've built rapport with them. And however we want to start a presentation, we need to get off to a good start. Because if you ask for some sort of activity and half the audience doesn't do it, perspiration is going to run down your back. So unless you own the audience, I personally wouldn't do it. But if it works for you, fine. Let's see. Once I heard you say come out punching. And yes, this is what I mean. Come out punching is don't waffle around. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming here. And it was really great when Paul invited me to speak. No, who cares? Get to the damn point. Say something of interest to them. And then it never ceases to amaze me, the intelligent, okay, good. And what you are doing, you are taking, Mike is taking that opening, good, and is then adapting it to his world of financial services. Perfect, fabulous. My opening line from Joan is, you'll never get a second chance to make a great first. Audience responds, wow, I am impressed. And an audience, you have made a first great impression on me. Good. Anytime you respond to the audience, you engage the audience, and that's perfect. Lynn, another question.
And you're caught up.
I'm caught up. Good. Perfect. All right, Paul, let's go back over to Fripp VT and look at this time. Why don't we look at speech structure? And while Paul is setting up the speech structure, many people are great speakers, but they don't know how to organize their remarks. And remember, the creative process is first, what's going in the presentation. Then what we want to do is organize it around a premise or a central theme, a big idea. And what your speech is then going to do is to prove your premise. So Paul, speech structure, if you can start.
Welcome to skeleton under the flesh of your word. In this course, you will learn how to stay calm while learning a way to organize any presentation. If you're ready, click the Start Training button. You will remember that there are 3 ingredients in every presentation. They are the content, the structure, and then the delivery. The more you work on clarifying your content, organizing your structure, then adding some initial scripting, the easier it will be for you to have professional sounding delivery. You wouldn't build a home without a blueprint. You would not drive to another city without a map or good instructions. This is the same with your speech structure. We call this course the skeleton under the flesh of your words because it's the clearest explanation I can think of. Once you have decided what content is going to be included in your presentation, you are ready to learn how to organize your content into a strong structure. By now, you have the basic content of your presentation listed. This includes the key ideas, stories, examples, statistics, quotes from authorities. Perhaps you've added stories from the client or their industry. If you're wise, you've asked the economic buyer what his or her objectives are for this meeting. Next, listen to the person organizing the meeting as they communicate what key ideas they hope you will get across in your presentation.
So as you can see, we ask you questions at the end, and many of the chapters are short and just get on to the point. So Paul, if you would like to actually show people the front page of Fripp VT if they wanted to sign up for a free trial. So you see, if you are not a Fripp VT user, we hope we have engaged and interested you enough that you would go to Fripp VT, and as you see, Paul is showing you, you sign up for a free trial. And what you receive in the trial, you get the first chapter of openings, stories, and sales. then we hope you will join and become part of our Fripp VT community, where not only do you have access to me 24/7, the very best information about presentation skills, you get invited to our Fripp VT user meetings. So Paul, thank you very much. Let us bring back. So we'll do a quick review, and if you have some last minute questions, short specific questions, please send them in. So we need to make presentation skills a focus. Even if you are a naturally great speaker, there is nothing like learning the actual techniques that go behind designing good presentations. So we need to have a good speech structure, and putting the structure together is best when you don't start with the PowerPoint. You start with the creative process, what's going in. A premise is really good, and here's your premise formula. Every, can, subject of your talk, how, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that does not make sense until you fill it in. So you might be delivering a presentation. However, this is a different audience. So you might say, this might be every successful entrepreneur can better prepare and present powerful programs. If I was saying this, you would think how? Then the structure becomes 1, by connecting to the audience. 2, opening with impact. 3, logically, conversationally structuring your presentation. Add great stories and razor sharp specificity, so you have the outline of your presentation. So we hope that you've enjoyed the samples of Fripp VT, and certainly being introduced to not only the 5 ways to look at your presentations, a way that we could be actively engaged with you in a very cost-effective and easy way. Now, are there any more questions, Paul, before we wave goodbye with a walk-away line?
There are. In let's see here. This is it's an opening line. In 2016, is 2016 the year that you will reduce turnover, improve retention, and reduce negative conflict in your nonprofit?
A great opening line.
All right, and then we have, well, I think you're going to do this in the recap. Can you repeat the 5 points given at the beginning? I think you just did.
Okay.
And let's see here. Someone said something about accuracy, for instance, in the speech that you were going over earlier when it was the financial guru, Suze Orman. The spelling was a little off. I think it's because they were typing it quickly into the chat box, but someone said, isn't it very important to be specific and get the pronunciations of names correct, etc.?
Whenever possible, yes. Believe me, we've all mispronounced names, and then the principle is, look, an audience does not expect you to be perfect. They expect you to be personable. And yes, we want to be as accurate as possible. And when you're quoting names, it's good to know how to pronounce them. And which brings up, if there are words in your introduction that people can't pronounce, change them. I used to say Patricia Fripp was a successful entrepreneur, and if people are just reading an introduction, they don't know how to say entrepreneur, so I'd say very successful business owner. Good. What else, Paul?
Last one. Have you been looking for love in all the wrong places? Pause for audience response. You can find the best unconditional love that money can buy in a furry, 4-legged friend, frequently known as man's best friend.
I love it. I love it.
And then can you repeat the Jack Lemmon quote?
Yes, certainly. Jack Lemmon said, speaking in public takes the nerve of a bullfighter, the energy of a nightclub host, and the concentration of a Buddhist monk. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to have access to a very much unbattered Fripp, as you can see how I usually look, 24/7. Please take a trial and join Fripp VT, where you will learn a lot more on how to improve your openings, your structure, your audience connection, your storytelling ability, and how to add razor sharp specificity. Remember, all learning takes repetition and reinforcement. Thank you.